rusty old farmer out working your field, hanging down over your tractor wheel. The sun beating down turned the red paint to orange, rusty old patches of steel. There's no farmer songs on that car radio, just cowboys, truck drivers, and pain. Well, this is my way to say thanks for the meal, and I hope there's no shortage of rain. Straw hat and old dirty hankies, mopping the face like a shoe. Thanks for the meal, here's a song that is real, from a kid from the city to you. Straw hat.
That particular song, the Farmer Song, you might remember, sung by Murray McLaughlin, who was actually born in Scotland and came to Canada at the age of 4. Just like St. Patrick went as a young man to Ireland. I'm stretching the connections here, I know. On the screen you have some pictures. One of them is a direct reference to the scripture of the gospel today, when Jesus speaks about the seed that must go into the earth to bear fruit. On the other side is a saying that I really like. And it says, anyone can count the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the number of apples in a seed. And that's important to what the scriptures are about today. So why would I start this with the Farmer Song? In that song there's a brilliant image of farmer. You know, straw hat and old dirty hanky and working in the field on the factory and the dirt and the raising the crops. An almost thankless task. And that image of the farm has great comfort for a lot of people, and in homage to the farmers that are here in our space today, we all want to say thank you for all the crops that you have raised and grown over the years. As a boy growing up, I had all these wonderful images of farm and rural life, living in small town Canada. And I had all the typical heroes, which of course were all American. You know, you grew up hearing about the legends of Paul Bunyan. You remember him? Another one that I heard a lot of legends about was Johnny Appleseed. Remember Johnny Appleseed? Got kids' movies made about him and TV shows. And the man with the threadbare clothes and the bare feet and the tin pan for a hat, running around the countryside throwing out apple seeds. Well, unlike Paul Bunyan, he was actually a real person. Born in the 1790s in Massachusetts, I believe. His name was John Chapman. His father was a hero of the American Revolution. And his father left the farm to work to fight in the revolution, and then came back to the farm and taught his son horticulture. And I use that word specifically. He taught him to be a horticulturalist and a nurseryman, to be a grower of fruit trees. But John Chapman was also, as a young man, joined what was called the New Church, a very strict order commonly called the Church of Swedenborg. And they were ascetics. They were very austere in their living. So he did wander the countryside in pretty much the way people saw him in the legends, in threadbare clothes, in barefoot, because it was part of his austerity program. The tin pan hat may or may not have been true. And did he cultivate apples all over the countryside, all through the Central America? Yes, he did. And it sounds weird until you dig deeper and realize why he did it. He was a smart man. In those days, anybody could homestead if you could grow a crop. 50 apple trees constituted a crop on a tract of land and made it a legal homestead. John Chapman would plant 50 trees on land all through the Midwest, and then he would come back a year later, or care for them for the year, whichever the story goes, and he would sell that to people who needed a homestead. And he homesteaded countless people that way. He didn't grow apples that you and I are familiar with. He didn't believe in grafting. He believed in God's natural process, so he would only plant trees. He would do no grafting principles, and he planted simple strains of apples that were hard, small, and bitter because they made good cider. And cider was a cash crop. Eating apples weren't. It's in our society that we eat apples the way we do. His apples could be made into cider, which was the safe drink of the day. It was the common drink of America at the time. Before beer, before wine, and in places where water was not known to be clean or clear, or whether it had bacteria, you could drink the cider. He produced this product. He was a smart farmer. Very smart. And out of what everybody else thought was silliness, he grew communities, spread his faith, and made a living. At the end of his life, he still claimed and owned 1,270 acres of land, and no one knows what his income was. But he also planted thousands of homesteads and spread life through the Midwest. Today, in the scriptures, we have some Greek people coming to see Jesus. They say to Philip, "We want to see Jesus." And I've had that actually said to me by someone at a church when I was a young minister, coming in the door and saying after one of my sermons, "That was great, but I want to see Jesus." And you have no idea how many ministers, this one doesn't have it, how many ministers' pulpits have emblazoned in some place on them a little plaque or a cross or something that says, "We want to see Jesus." This has been pushed at scripture, at preachers for 1,000 years. We want to see Jesus. Make sure you stay on point to see Jesus. And we have this sense of this scripture that it's about us telling you what Jesus is really like. These Greeks come to see Jesus. They come to Philip. Why Philip? Here's a hard question. Why would the Greeks come to Jesus to see... Why would the Greeks come to Philip to see Jesus? Because Philip spoke Greek. Which means they didn't speak Aramaic. Which means they weren't coming to hear Jesus. They wanted to see him. They wanted to see the guy that was doing these amazing things, like raising the dead like Lazarus, or healing people. They wanted to see the spectacle. They wanted to see the huge superhero. They wanted to see the big name in the news. So what did Jesus do? He didn't see them. He didn't let them see him. He didn't go anywhere near them. He just said to the disciples when Philip went and got Andrew, and then they went to Jesus and said, "Hey, we got these Greek people over here. They want to see you." And Jesus says, "My time's not ready yet. They'll have to come back and they can actually see me." And then he gives this oblique reference to seeds going into the ground and life and being lifted up. And he was telling them what every farmer on the planet knows. You can't get anything from a seed until it dies. You stick it in the ground, it's got to break down and start to rot, and out of it sprouts the new life. Am I right? You can't tell people about that. They've got to experience it. When you plant your things in the garden, like your bulbs in the fall or your seeds in the spring, you sit there, and I think there's a prayer on everybody who has a garden or every farmer on the planet. It's like, please God, make this work. It's up to you. You got the sun, you got the rain, you got the conditions to bring this to life. And what Jesus is saying, you can't see what I've got right now. This is like, okay, just go look at a bag of seeds. But you want to see the miracle? Come back when it all starts to work. And what he's showing them is, you got to look at me on the cross. At that point in time, what you're looking at is the sprouting of life. I read an article the other day by a minister who was talking about some of this stuff, and he was saying about how in his guy had been a lawyer whose son died, then his wife left him. He had a life that was tragic on every level, except that as I'm reading it, I'm looking at it and going, wow, some of those things are just too close to home for me. And I can remember those days when it was like, please God, just make sense of it. Give some life to it. I'm dying here. And then you get the sense that, yeah, life comes out of that death. Growth comes into that life. And things happen. And you get the sense of what Jesus is trying to say to the disciples when he's avoiding the Greeks is, you got to wait for the resurrection. And out of every divorce, there's a resurrection. Out of every death, there's a resurrection. Out of every dull moment, there's a resurrection. Out of every broken promise, there's a resurrection. Out of everything that causes some sense of death in our life, there's a resurrection. That's what this Easter is about. That's what Lent is about. As we begin to look at the process of, what is my life about? What am I like? It's so typical for us that it happens in the springtime. I don't know how other cultures do it with other climate zones, but here we can actually come into the Lenten season anticipating the resurrection of Jesus Christ, because we get to anticipate it. We know the story. Can you imagine what it's like when you don't know the end? Yes, you can. Just look at your own life. There's been moments when you didn't know there was going to be anything ahead of you. You didn't think there was going to be another day. You didn't think there's only going to be another day worth living. And then it does. It happens. It grows. You find that smile back on your lips. You find that sense of, yeah, this is going to be okay. I can make this happen. No, we can make this happen. And you find a sense of life. But you have to be shrewd about it. Shrewd like the farmer that knows when and where to plant the crops, how to nurture them, how to protect the seed. And then in my home, there's an apple tree this big. It started as a seed, obviously, and it's been through a variety of different places and experiences in my home, trying to protect it from a cat that wanted to eat it. But it's a remarkable thing to watch it grow, knowing that it was this hopeless little thing, this little seed. But how much life can come from it? It's this big now, it's 6 inches tall now. How big will it be someday? How much life can come from some small, dying seed? How much life came from John Chapman, who planted homesteads, not just trees, and brought life to entire states in the U.S.? How much life will come from your life because you believe in life and in hope and in resurrection?